Welcome to Behind the Pages. Bruce Macbain is back on the show today. Bruce is a former professor and also a former ESL teacher. He holds a master's degree in classic studies and a PhD in ancient history. He is here today to talk about Odin's Child. This is a work of historical fiction that takes place in 11th century Iceland and Scandinavia. It centers around a young man who is basically struggling to figure out who he is and which of his father's values will eventually become his own as he moves into adulthood. Welcome.
Well, Diane, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back here again. I always enjoy these talks.
I do too, and I really enjoy reading your books too.
Thank you.
They're always exciting and keep the reader going. Do you want to start by just telling us a little bit about this book? Who is your main character and where do we find him as?
Okay, well, you did such a good job. I don't know what I have to add to it.
Well, tell us his name, for instance.
Okay.
Where he is.
The character is a young Icelander named Odd, O-D-D, Odd Tangle-Hair. Because he has a mass of shaggy, black, unruly hair, which he inherits from his father, Black Thorvald, not the typical Icelander. And the crux of the plot is that not only has Odd inherited these dark looks from his father, but has inherited his father's temperament. And his father was a man who had been a prominent chieftain in Viking, and a prominent chieftain and a great Viking, up until the year 1000, when Iceland converted to Christianity. And Black Thorvald held out against us, retreated back to his farm in a rage, and more or less cut off his contact with the rest of the country. Sank gradually into a kind of melancholy, a depression, and Odd takes after him and has a complex love-hate relationship with him. In part, he fears his father. In another way, he wants to be closer to him, but the man has become so closed off. And what Odd feels that he can do to display his loyalty to his father is to stick to the old religion, no matter what. He says, not only am I Black Thorvald's child, but in a sense I am Odin's child, Odin being the ancient king of the Norse gods. And this is what everything follows from that.
Because of that, yes, yeah. And the difference, I think, is that in Odd's case, he's doing it out of loyalty to his father, not necessarily because he believes very strongly one way or the other. Isn't that true?
Odd is never quite sure.
Yeah.
Is never quite sure where he comes down on this.
Where his father is sure.
Yeah, his father is sure. And at one point in the book, Odd says, when Odd performs a pagan sacrifice for the first time in Lapland, where they actually kill an animal and sacrifice it. And Odd asks himself, how do I actually feel doing this? And his answer is self-conscious. My father knew that this was true. I only hope it's true.
Right. His father basically sacrificed everything, his leadership in the community, his prosperity, basically everything, because he did not want to give up his real beliefs. Right.
And this is actually based on something, you know, all of the, not all, many of the incidents and many of the ideas in the novel come from the Icelandic sagas, these wonderful works of medieval Icelandic fiction, which hark back to the Viking Age, and is as close as we'll ever get to the reality of that world. And one of the sagas, the saga of Egil Skallagrimsson, is about precisely such a man as Black Thorvald, who, when all the rest of his family convert to Christianity, Egil holds out to his dying day. He's simply not going to give in. So it's not utterly fantastic, this idea.
Right, this whole idea. Well, as the book opens, Odd is at a horse fighting event. And,
Stallion fight, yeah.
Yeah, can you explain what that is and what takes place?
Yes, well, this was a popular entertainment at gatherings in Iceland where they would match two stallions against each other, and the owner of each horse would have, it's called a goad, some kind of a pronged club, which they would hit the horse with to drive it to fight. Now, Odd doesn't do this.
Right.
Odd's horse is ready to fight, never needs to be touched. I mean, there's certain things that you can't go there. But Odd joins in the fight, throws himself against the horse's flank. He says, the same blood, the same foam covered us both, the same battle joy rose in our throats. So it is of course cruelty to animals if you want to look at it that way, but for Odd it's him and his horse fighting together. But as so often happened in Iceland, these kinds of events led to bloodshed and then blood feud between two families, and that of course is what happens in this case.
Yes, because basically Odd's horse is winning this fight and then ends up losing and dying. Is maimed, and Odd has to kill it to put it out of its misery with it. And that because the opponent's horse, the opponent of the other horse, cheats and maims. He throws something and maims Odd's horse. So Odd's brother Gunnar tells him that he has to exact revenge for this. Does Odd have any idea of how to do this?
What happens immediately in that scene, of course, is that the chieftain who was presiding over this community event comes storming in and says, that's it. I mean, if we can't have a simple horse fight without people getting mad at each other, I'll put a stop to the whole thing. Okay, even the horse's eye for Mord's eye, no blood money to be paid, forget about it.
Right.
And leaves it at that.
We should explain what happens, because this is very key to the plot, is that even though Odd doesn't exactly know how to exact revenge, his brother does, and they attack the other family, and the son of the man who cheated, his eye, they put
he loses his eye. But we know that this feud is going to simmer on, that nobody is going to forget this. And time goes on then. The rest of the summer goes on, and then an atrocity happens, which I don't know how much we want to give this away, but that's what finally provokes the lawsuit at the All thing and the expulsion of Odd and his brother from Iceland.
Well, when the elder does sort of declare, okay, everything's even, you lost a horse, he lost an eye, so you're even, nothing more needs to be done. If we could ask Odd to tell us at that point whether he thought things were even.
Oh, no. His whatever Halti says, Rut and his sons have not paid enough. Have not paid enough.
And Odd is basically at this event he has a specific agenda. Do you want to tell us what that is?
Well, as going back to what I began by saying, he has inherited his father's temperament, his father's temper, his father's tendency to melancholy, and what he dreads is that he has inherited his father's cowardice, as he interprets it. And so he needs, at the young age of 16, to prove to himself that he's brave, that he can step into a circle of strange men and shout his challenge. And Gunnar doesn't want him to. Gunnar says, you're too young, you're too small, you're going to get trampled, let me do it. And Odd says, no, I have to do this.
When Odd goes home and tells his father what happened, and that now that they are going to be in a feud, his father says there'll be no feud, it's done, it's over with. Odd thinks his father is talking out of cowardice. Is he?
Well, his father is talking out of long experience of how things work in Iceland. In other words, we are defenseless. We're a small family. We have no allies. They've all gone away. And if we get involved in a feud with some powerful family that has powerful friends, they will take everything. Right, and I'm not going to allow, for any reason, I'm not going to allow that to happen.
Right. Well, Odd that he doesn't like this at all, and he calls his father a coward. Does his father have any understanding of how the rest of the world perceives him?
Well, it's hard to know exactly what Thorvald understands in this advanced state of depression that he has sunk into, and I don't even try to go there. We're never really on the inside of Thorvald. All we can know, because, for one reason, because the book is a first-person narrative, Odd is telling this story. We only know what Odd knows. And we only, or we can only surmise what Odd surmises. And to Odd, as to the rest of the families, Thorvald has become this kind of hateful stranger in their midst, this virtually unspeaking, unreactive. He says he sits every night brooding, carving his rune stone as unmoving as I can't quite remember how I said it, the way water laps a stone in the river. And nobody really understands Thorvald anymore.
I would guess that Thorvald feels misunderstood.
Yes, I suppose I suppose that's a fair thing to say.
Yeah.
But Thorvald is not good at explaining himself, and so there's only so far you can go with him.
Well, you get that sense for him when he's sitting in that chair that he feels misunderstood by the world, not his immediate family, his community, and basically everyone. He thinks he's a person of principle. I think I mean, he has stood up for his principles, and like I said, at the loss of knowing he was going to lose everything he had. But I think my guess is that he feels that nobody really understands that.
I suppose, I mean, I suppose you could say that.
So religion, as it is throughout history, is kind of the source of the conflict between Thorvald's family, their community, and you get the sense that they're not the only ones in all of Iceland that this existed, because Christianity, yes, has been accepted as a national religion, but there were always people who were not going to follow it.
Sure.
What was the religion, the old religion that they?
Well, the old religion, and parenthetically, I should say, it's no longer just an old religion, because I discovered a very large community of neo-pagans. I can speak about that in a moment, because it's interesting. So for whom this is very much still a living religion. But the old religion was the Norse mythology that we're all somewhat familiar with from grammar school, I suppose. Thor and Odin and the other gods, and lesser beings, elves, trolls, and so forth. Odin being the head of the pantheon, who is connected with warfare, with the berserkers, with rune magic, with prophecy. He rides an 8-legged horse. He has only one eye. His emblematic animal is the raven. And this is the religion that most Icelanders believed in before the conversion in the year 1000. And if I can just go back to this parenthetical thought, as I say, it's coming back. I was astonished to learn that in Iceland today, they are building a pagan temple to Odin, Thor, and Frey on a hillside just about outside Reykjavik, which is supposed to be ready for use by next year for celebrating pagan festivals, weddings, you name it, and with the capacity of several hundred people and a priesthood. and there seems to be considerable interest in reviving the old religion, and not only in Iceland, but elsewhere. I went online.
But as a religious belief?
As a
or
religious belief, yeah, no,
interest?
utterly serious.
Wow.
Seriously. I went online, if you go on Facebook and Google+, you will find a dozen or more online communities of pagans.
Wow.
Heathen is actually the word they prefer, and I communicated with them. You know, it's a way of pitching the book, quite frankly. Yeah. I wrote a note and put it up on all of these boards saying, would you share with me what it is that drew you to paganism today from whatever it was you were raised as?
Right.
And I got back a lot of extremely thoughtful and heartfelt and interesting responses from people who had been brought up as Catholics, as Mormons. One was a Pentecostalist preacher, who have all somehow found their way to Norse paganism, and this is their religion now.
Wow. That is
How
very
interesting
surprising.
is that? I mean,
yeah, quite surprising.
who knew, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. Did you know that before you started the book?
No, I didn't.
Oh, wow.
I did not.
Interesting. Well, Odd, if we were to tell Odd that his father was actually very brave, would he be surprised to hear that? Would he even know
Would
what
be.
meant?
He would be delighted to hear it.
Yeah.
And in fact, he does hear a little bit from his mother about what a fine young man his father had been before this dark cloud descended on him.
Yeah.
So he has that sense.
Right. I would guess, though, as a young man, he doesn't understand bravery in an ethical form. You know, he understands it more, you can fight, you can grab your sword. But, you know, as a young man, he probably doesn't understand bravery as in the context of standing up for your principles.
Perhaps not. Perhaps not. And there is that moment in the book at the trial in North End where Thorvald does fight.
Yeah.
And Odd is thrilled to see this. For that instant, the years fall away, and the Thorvald that he always wished had been his father was there again for a moment, you know, but then only for a moment.
Right. Odd's father has told him that he is his spirit child, and that he is really everything to him. What responsibility does this carry for Odd?
I think Odd interprets it simply to mean that no matter what, he is going to stay faithful to what his father believed in, you know. And he says, you know, there are many fine Christians. My mother is a Christian. She's not a bad woman. My uncle Hoskold is a Christian. My best friend Calf is a Christian. But for me, almost let life be simple, but no. In the end, I have to follow this path.
Right, yeah.
And if I can just put in another point, you know, I suppose someone listening to this or looking at the book might just say, why make pagans your heroes? You know, why go there at all? And I hasten to say that I am not a pagan, you know. So, you know, my personal belief or lack thereof is not to the point. But for a dramatic reason. For the same reason that I imagine when Margaret Mitchell wrote Gone with the Wind, she made Southerners her heroes. I mean, presumably not because she believed in slavery and secession, but she understood what I think every author does, is that when you have a story which is a clash of ways of life, where there's going to be a winner and a loser.
Yeah.
The drama, the pathos is always with the losers.
Yeah.
Winners are boring. It's the losers who evoke our emotions. You know.
That's true, yeah. And Christianity was adopted as a national religion in almost a pretty arbitrary way, wasn't it? Do you want to tell us how that came to be?
Yes, and we get this in 2 or 3 versions, differing in some details, but basically the same version from the sagas. It was the year 1000, in which many Christians believed that Christ was going to come back to earth. So it was a time of heightened religious tension, and missionaries came from Saxony, from Norway, from other countries to Iceland. And the story goes that at one meeting one summer at the Althing, which is the parliament and the gathering of the whole country, it was simply decided, we cannot have people fighting over this. Somebody has to decide. And they chose an honored, respected old man and said, okay, you decide. And he went into his tent and lay down and pulled his blanket over his face and lay there motionless for a day or a night while everybody in their thousands outside waited with bated breath, what's going to happen? And he came out and he said, it's going to be Christianity. Apparently is how it happened.
Right. Interesting.
And most people had themselves baptized. But a few angry holdouts like Thorvald who stomped back off to their farm and said, I'm having nothing to do with it.
Again, or sort of early in the book, we find out that Odd's sister is attacked. She's sexually assaulted and then dies very soon after from her wounds. And we are pretty sure this is done by the man who the feud has,
that they're feuding
between,
with.
Yeah, the two families. Well, what does this man stand to gain from provoking Thorvald's family?
Hopefully, to get their farm, to get their land, to drive them off. We have to realize this was a violent society. It was also, interestingly enough, a hyper-legal society. I mean, the law codes of medieval Iceland are of baffling complexity.
Really?
And there's all kinds of things that the process of trials is extremely complex, and yet at the same time very violent. And Strife Rutt, and his ally Snorri, who's an old enemy of Thorvald, simply say, we're going to provoke a fight and we're going to wipe these people out.
Right. Well, provoke a fight so that then he can say, they attacked him.
Yeah,
He's basically going to try and turn it around and say that they attacked him. Because he has money and power on his side.
He has, yes, and powerful friends.
So even at that point, Thorvald says, seeing that his daughter has been attacked in this way, is probably going to die, says there'll be no revenge for this.
Right. We're not going to be dragged into this. And then at that point, the redoubtable mother, Joran Shiprest, takes over the family. She'd say,
that's it.
Get rid of Thorvald. We are going to take revenge. And wakes Odd and Gunnar in the middle of the night and sends them out, and from that point on, there's no doubt that Joran is running the family.
Right. Even if Odd had known the consequences, would he have been able to do anything other than what his mother sent him out to do?
I don't think so. I think he is eager to fight, eager to take revenge. He has this old sword and he pulls it out and feels the edge with his thumb and said, oh, this sword has belonged to many men over the years, and perhaps they've killed with it. I, at the old age of 16, have never struck a blow with it. Time to change that.
And I really sort of see that as a turning point, when he starts to really understand the differences between himself and his father. He's always been afraid, I think, in some ways, that he is his father. But in this case, even knowing the consequences, he couldn't do anything other than what he did, which is different than his father. His father weighed the consequences, said, we can't win anyway.
Right.
So we're not
Odd is going to fight. No matter what happens, he's going to fight.
And that's very key to sort of his personality development at that moment. When he goes off with his brother
Sure.
to seek revenge.
Odd is a fighter. Odd is a complex mixture of traits, some admirable and some not. He has an uncontrollable temper,
Yeah.
which gets the best of him at times,
Yeah.
and leads him to make very serious mistakes. Although he always, in the end, regrets it and does what he can to repair it.
Right.
He is a person. I always try to work this in somewhere. I love to call him a thinking man's Viking.
Okay.
Because he reflects, he does think, he wonders about things, he has insight, he's curious, he's gifted. He's a natural linguist, he's a poet. At the same time, he can do wildly inappropriate things and get himself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
He's all of these things together, which is why I like him so much.
I do too. You know, after this big fight, Odd feels that he is now a warrior. Is there any going back for him after this? I mean, in a sense
Not
of
really,
personality.
because now events are really out of his hands. They lose their suit at the All-Thing.
Right.
They're banished. What are they to do? You see? And Odd is lucky to get away with his life. I don't want to give away too many of the details.
I think I meant more in terms of the concept of who he realizes that he is.
Well, what I think the overarching thought to him is that he will leave Iceland, because he must.
Yeah.
And he will go as far as he must and do whatever he can to finally be able someday to come back, rich enough, powerful enough, old enough to take vengeance on the enemies. I mean, that's however long it may take. And of course, as the trilogy progresses, we will learn that it takes much longer than he ever thought, and when he does come back, it's not in the way that he thought that he would. But I don't want to give that away.
No, yeah, you don't have to give that away, but it is in the last minute or so that we have. I would like you to tell us about. This is only the first in the trilogy.
This is the first in the trilogy. The second volume is called The Ice Queen, and that takes him to Russia. Okay. This book takes him. What's the order now? Lapland, Norway, where he's drawn into a religious civil war, Finland, where they are captured by a sorceress, probably giving away too much of this, and finally to the border of Russia, where he meets Harold, Harold the Ruthless, who was just a youngster like himself. The second volume, The Ice Queen, they proceed on to Russia, to the court of Grand Prince Yaroslav and his scheming wife Ingigerd. And the third volume, which is called The Guardsman, will take him to Byzantium, where he joins the Varangian Guard, the Byzantine Emperor's imperial guard.
Wow, wow. It's a very adventuresome young man. Yeah. So you're going to take us through basically his lifetime then?
Yes, yes.
In a very interesting historical period.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to ask you a little bit more about how you decided to center on that exact period, but unfortunately, we are out of time.
Oh my God! Again, we didn't get to the Berserkers. We didn't get to the Jomsvikings.
Well, this is why the readers are going to have to read the book. The listeners will have to read the book. You have been watching Behind the Pages from the staff of 22 City View. I'm Diane Goshgarian. Thank you for being with us. And thank you.
Well, as always, it's gone by much too fast.
Yeah.